Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Gorman with my co-host,
Brenda Hedrick from Matrix Solutions.
Matrix Solutions, if you didn't know. It is the Candid Conversations Day. This is the pregame show. You're getting you warmed up. It's, like any good show, they always do a warm-up.
Right.
The personalities, in this case, Brenda and I were the personalities.
Need to come out, get everybody ready.
Exactly. Cheer, clap. Yeah.
Because we have a
panel.
tremendous panel today. So excited about the panel today. So we need to get everybody revved up and excited. We've got leaders in the media industry, and they're going to impart their vision, wisdom for 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, exactly. Pat Laplatney, from co-CEO of Gray Television.
Yep, we have Steve Pruett, who is executive chairman of CMG/Apollo, and I know they think they have a different name maybe that I should know, or maybe a new name. We'll have to ask Steve about that. And of course, not least, but Emily Barr, president and CEO of Graham Media. So incredibly excited.
Now, in full disclosure, both Pat and Steve are Matrix clients. Yeah. Emily is not, but my understanding is, since she can't say anything here, my understanding is she's dying to become a Matrix client. So it's really exciting.
That's right.
Really exciting.
Well, as you know, I also sit on the board of Alliance for Women in Media, which does a Gracie's Award for women who have content for women, about women, by women. And I can also say Steve and Pat, although with Gray we worked through Karen Yager and Becky Myers, and Emily have all been incredibly generous with the Alliance for Women in Media and working with us to get some local talent content submitted for the Gracie Award. So for that, I'm really grateful. One other note I want to just throw out there in case someone watched us last month and wondered, where was Mark Gorman? Well, he was in Mexico last month. And where are you now, Mark?
I'm back here where you might notice that we're back in the Matrix Studios. Our high tech, I know. I forgot my Candid Conversations cup. So today, Starbucks is sponsoring my cup. If you like coffee, you'll love Starbucks. They are not actually a sponsor, but if you are interested in sponsoring the Candid Conversations, we're open. Contact Kurt Emmerich, our CFO, and he'll make all the arrangements.
That's right.
So, yeah, we're in the Matrix Studios, which is a laptop with a camera and a cell phone that has a little alarm on it. Very high tech.
That's right.
So we're back in. It's interesting because I was thinking about this the other day. Working from home, I think we're all a little bit more casual, though I do try to dress up somewhat. Yep. Though Matrix, we're casual, of course, we're a technology company. The other day, I had to go out to the doctor's office, and I thought, I got to throw on some dress shoes. I don't want to go in sneakers or whatever. And I realized it's the first time in like 3 months I put on dress shoes, and I'm like, these things are super tight. I mean, I have been Fred Flintstoning my feet for the last 3 months, and that's how I drive my car. I put my feet down and I just run.
That's right.
So it's kind of nice to be in the office, and certainly, I mean, we were talking earlier about the rollout of the vaccine. I know we are looking forward to a time when we can start interacting more on a regular basis with our colleagues. Both here at the company, but also our colleagues in the industry.
Absolutely. And it's funny you should even mention that about the dress shoes, because today coming into the office, which I was excited to do, I actually put on, a skirt and heels, which might sound crazy, but again, you haven't done it forever. And so I'm very happy. We talked about the vaccine, hoping that, we can get everyone vaccinated in a timely manner and get back into the office. While I think we have shown as a country, and certainly our industry has managed to 2020, adapt and be successful. Certainly don't want to over glamorize it. I do think that we are ready to get back and have some conversations face to face with people, have good whiteboarding sessions. We're a technology company, start to think about the future. And I do think while we've pushed those thoughts forward in 2020, there is nothing like a good face to face conversation.
I know I had mentioned this to you, and I don't remember if I had mentioned this on our last Candid Conversations. It may have been afterwards. I had read an interview with Sam Zell, And he was saying, all this talk about people working totally from home, he's like, that will change as soon as the first salesperson says, you know what, I'm going to jump on a plane, and they get that sale.
Yep.
So I do certainly think, listen, we're more comfortable with these kind of meetings, but there is something about being face to face. Now, I am excited for this conversation. Yep. Just as Brenda mentioned, I'll be your host for our candid conversation. One of the, of course, we prepped, we talked about what we'll be talking about is to give an outline. One area we're going to talk about is the regulatory environment, particularly for media companies. And it's interesting because today, the Supreme Court is actually hearing oral arguments where the FCC for the past, I think since 2002.
Yep, I was going to say 20 years.
Has been working to relax the ownership rules around local media.
Yep.
And kind of interesting because it's, if I recall this correctly, the people who pushed to move to the Supreme Court were the NAB, they obviously have a lobbying arm, Fox Corporation, and Sinclair.
Yep.
Thought that was interesting because I don't view Fox as necessarily somebody who's out there saying, I'm going to be a big acquirer, but
you never know.
You don't, I guess.
Good questions. And just, to segment from the NAB, Emily is the chair of the NAB.
That's right.
She represents, so she will have some insight into that. I think, of course, we've talked in many of our conversations, the political, then we had the election, then we had the final election, I guess. And then we had, some craziness. I'll try to be, somewhat calm about it. And we have an inauguration tomorrow with a new administration. So they're potentially, although I'm not sure that anyone has decided what. I've heard some changes, maybe not some changes, but I definitely think what the Supreme Court is hearing today, hopefully is good for the local broadcasters.
I mean, I'm personally in favor of it.
Yeah.
I think they need some room to be more competitive, particularly when you don't have all the other rules around the Facebooks where they say we're just a marketplace. And in fact, this morning on TV, I don't want to give it away, but I was watching Morning Joe. I do flip stations. Brenda will tell you I actually go around all the media because I like to see different viewpoints.
Yes.
But it was interesting. He was saying how it's sort of unfair because here they are. If they said something that was blatantly untrue, they are held accountable, where Facebook just says, oh, we're a marketplace, anyone can say anything. Then of course you have this idea of free speech, et cetera, private company. I think it's complex, but at the same time, there should be, in my opinion, some rules around that. If you are expanding to a pretty big audience, there should be some level of what's true or not.
Well, I agree. And I also think that, these are our customers. We know the content that they produce. Local broadcasters produce some tremendous content, some for very valuable reasons. And actually, the AWM extended our categories based on the happenings in DC at the Capitol because of frontline reporters. And I do think there are people, listen, there are bad eggs in every basket, right? But there are, and both sides, but fundamentally a free press and people trying to do their job. We sit on the sales side of media, so we're focused on that. But fundamentally, as Americans, we want a free press and we want accuracy, and we do want people to be allowed to do their jobs and not to be, shredded for,
of course,
giving us their side of the story, and someone saying, and there does not seem to be any, well, hopefully there is, but right now it just seems like it's a free for all. You can say whatever you want and cite whatever you want, and we'll see.
It will be interesting.
Enough of my opinion on that.
I'm just going to say one other thing because we are at time.
Yeah.
It is interesting because with sort of some of the backlash against social media, Turkey also announced today that they will not allow Twitter, Pinterest, and somebody else to actually have ads because Turkey is requiring them to have people on the ground in Turkey to do that, and since they didn't comply. So I thought that was actually quite interesting. But we are coming up on time.
Yeah.
Our high-tech alarm went off.
Yeah, it sure did.
And I'm going to make my way to my computer. Deanna's going to get us ready,
Right.
and we'll see you in about 30 seconds.
Thank you. Looking
Thanks.
forward to it.
Welcome, everybody. This is our Candid Conversations. We talked in the pregame. We are being graced with an amazing panel today. We have Emily Barr from Graham Media. We have Steve Pruett from CMG, though as Brenda mentioned, you guys, I think, have a new name.
Just CMG, our
Okay.
Cox Media Group. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And Pat Laplatney from Gray. So first of all, I want to thank you all for joining us here today and in this Candid Conversations. And so we're going to start out. As you guys are leaders of your organizations, and we have the same thing here, I'd like to give our team here an internal mission statement by which they keep that in the back of their minds for everything that we do. So we say here, Matrix is here to empower the media ad sales world with expertise, technologies, and insights. And so as you go forward and as you think about moving your organizations forward, what is your internal mission statement? And I'm going to ask Emily for you to start, but of course, on Candid Conversations, this is open mic. Feel free to jump in and let's have a conversation.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mark. So our Graham Media Group's internal mission statement is that we are the authentic local voice, passionately informing and celebrating our communities.
Nice. That is, I love it.
Thank you.
And so we'll go down the list because I know we're going to talk about next how this is really guiding and what your missions are as a company. So Steve, if you want to tell your mission
We have
statement.
not publicized yet. As you know, we acquired a new CEO last year, and we've been working as a team since then. And we are just on the verge of publishing it. So I don't feel right disclosing it just yet because I think we need a chance for Dan to distribute that under his watch.
Sure. Let's call Dan right now.
Yeah,
Dan,
get him on
on the line.
He has it. I mean, it's been approved. We've all agreed on it, but it's just not public yet.
Fair enough. And Pat?
Sure. So thanks for having me, by the way, Mark.
Absolutely.
I think the question was, what are three drivers that guide our business? Yeah, I'd say that we want to serve our viewers and users the local news and information they want, whatever platform and whenever they want it. We want to help our advertising clients with bespoke marketing solutions that help grow their business. And we want to provide a healthy, happy, diverse workplace for our employees, room for personal growth. And I think if we take care of those three things, our shareholders will be really happy as well.
Yeah. And Mark, to go back to what Pat said, our view of the world is protect the core on the business side. This is not so much the company mission statement, but just on the business side, protect the core, optimize the core, innovate in the core, and innovate alongside the core, adjacent to the core.
That makes sense. And I know, even having heard some of the conversations, Emily, from your standpoint too, I know from your organization, you all have also been focused on doing things that are around the core, but also expanding the reach of the organization in that way, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, so we try to be very, from a technology standpoint, we try to lean into technology, and we have a very robust group headed up by Catherine Badalamente, who have really focused on, the things we can do technologically to keep us at the fore. But I think at our core, we want to be great stewards of news and information in our communities. We want to do well by doing good. So if we if we deliver what it is our communities are craving and what they need, then the money will follow. So we don't start out with we need to make money. We start out with what is it we are trying to achieve, and can that then generate revenue for us? And we want to be at all times champions of localism, because it is certainly my belief, and I think Steve and Pat probably would agree, that what we do locally in our communities and how we cover them is really going to be the driver for all of us. We're not necessarily going to compete on a national level unless we string together something, either in the form of syndication or a network or something like that. So our focus is to be champions of localism on all platforms.
So I'm going to jump around here because I know we have some questions, but I'd love to jump in the pregame. I had mentioned how today the Supreme Court is hearing the oral arguments for relaxing or potentially relaxing some of the ownership rules, which is something that I have agreed with. But I am curious, as you all look out and think about the regulatory environment, I like to think about what's happened. We're going into a new administration, so what could happen? What are the good and the bad things that happened in the past 4 years, or things that you may have not expected or expected and didn't happen? And then what are your thoughts about what's going to happen today and what the next 4 years may bring with this new administration and how they may focus at regulations within this area? And so I'm gonna ask Steve, maybe you can start that conversation.
Well, that's good because Emily knows a lot more than I do. So she
okay, that was very fair. You're right.
The current state of affairs.
Yes.
But let me say, from our perspective, my perspective as a leader and in the industry, we need less regulation, generally speaking, around broadcasters. We need more freedom to own more, both across the country and in our markets. We need the ability to be deregulated to the point where we can compete with new threats and go after new opportunities. As to what is actually going on, I'll leave that to when you pick on Emily, because since she's involved directly with the process.
And that is a great point, because Emily, we talked about, I believe, if I'm correct, NAB, Fox, and Sinclair are the ones who have really brought this along with the FCC, if that's correct. I'd love if you can discuss it. There may be things that you're not allowed to talk about, but would love to hear what your viewpoints are in this area.
So I have two different points of view. So one is that as the person running a relatively small, we used to be considered medium-sized, now we're considered smaller. As somebody running a relatively small company, honestly, the ownership changes that could come really will probably have no impact on us. Unless we purchase an enormous number of TV stations, it should have no actual impact on us. But I think as a broadcaster and as somebody who has been on the NAB board with Pat, I think we all would like to see a level playing field. So I think when Steve says we want less regulation, I think what we want is equivalent amounts. If we're going to have regulation, we're always going to have some regulation. Let's be honest. It's never going to completely go away. But we are competing with Google and Facebook and so forth, and they are, in the Wild West, and we're, still constrained by rules that were created 30, 40 years ago. And so today's oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court were really about this whole issue of ownership and what some of the limitations are to broadcast companies, how much they can own in a given market, the old newspaper cross ownership rules, things of that nature. I listened to a good deal of it today. I won't profess to say I understood it all because these lawyers go pretty fast. But I would like to think that as we look at a world that is moving quickly towards streaming, and our own network partners are moving aggressively towards streaming, that we, as the sort of last man standing, if you will, on the local side, are not left in a position of vulnerability where we can no longer provide the kind of news and information that keeps our communities whole. So it is my contention that we just simply be allowed to play on the same playing field, whatever that means. I do think Democrats generally are a little more focused on regulation, typically. So we don't know what the next 4 years will bring. We don't even know who's going to be running the FCC at this point. But I think I think today's arguments and other things that are going on have put us in a good position to at least modernize the regulations, if nothing else.
Fair enough. And Pat, I'm curious, when I think about that, I am surprised, and maybe the Third Circuit Court of Appeals is really the problem. I believe they're in my hometown of Philly, if I'm not mistaken. So I apologize for that. But no one says anything bad about Philly to me, please.
We'll give you a hall pass.
I have been surprised, to Emily's point, usually from a regulatory perspective, Republicans tend to be more lenient, let's say. And I am surprised that this hasn't been able to make more headway than it has. And maybe it's been the court systems that have held it up. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's clearly been the court, Mark, for the last, I believe it's 18 years, a 3-judge panel with 1 dissenting. So two judges have essentially sort of stymied the FCC attempts. And it wasn't just Chairman Pai; it literally goes back, to almost the turn of the century.
Sure.
In terms of the FCC trying to do their job and the court frustrating them. So today is a landmark day. I think that I'm hopeful that the FCC will be allowed to do their job. Really is what it boils down to. And would agree with what Steve said. I think you need to allow, and Emily, allow us to be on a level playing field and to put some context to that in a given local market. Facebook and Google are doing more than half of the local ad revenue right now. So what we're fighting for as local broadcasters, the ability just to acquire additional TV stations, and I think in the highest percentage of local revenue that the TV stations in aggregate generate. So in other words, in Philly, WPVI and KYW and CAU and WTXF and whoever else is there, WPSG, if you combined all their revenues together, they might make up 13 to 15% of the total advertising market, where Google and Facebook are already north of 50. So, you're not allowed to put a 1 and 2 or a 1 and 3 together, which really means that, if there's a really strong station, maybe doing 5% of the market, they can't even get to 6 or 7 or 8%, where they're competing with Google and Facebook that are in the 20s and 30s, which is borderline absurd, Mike. So, yeah. So look, I'd also say that, Chairman Pai, I think, he recognized the unique value of local media. I really believe that. And as Emily said, we don't know who the next chairman of the FCC is going to be. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But we'll continue, as will the NAB, to push for equity.
So I hear what you all are saying, and I'm in full agreement. But at the same time, is it fair to say that some of potentially the lost revenue is that broadcasters have maybe not adapted quick enough to an environment of easier buying, easier understanding metrics, et cetera? I always think when I see you go into our clients, and this is no disrespect, but you have a plethora of cultures, even within one organization. And certainly I think senior management at all of our clients gets it, and you meet people in the organization who get it. But you also know there's a lot of people who have done things in a certain way for a long time, still produces nice revenue. Is there a cultural shift which I always think changing culture is the hardest thing you can do? is there a cultural shift? Maybe it's started, but that still needs to happen to also make you more competitive against those organizations. Is that a fair question?
So I'd be happy to answer that. I think that, can we do better? Absolutely. Can we reduce friction in the sales process? Yes, we have to do that. And you're as aware of that as anybody. If we can make it easier and more efficient to buy spot television, then there'll be more money chasing spot television. So I agree with the general premise. I'm not sure it's a completely cultural thing. I think there's a number of hurdles we got to get over to get there, but we've got to get there. Ultimately, the stars will align, and we will make it easier to buy spot television.
So I think one of the impediments, Mark, and I agree with everything Pat has said so far. But when I was chairman of the Fox affiliate board, we had 66 owners, and we had to have a hotel ballroom to have a meeting in. And I would argue that we could probably have that meeting at Denny's now. So there was a time when it was very difficult to get broadcasters to work together for common solutions, just because there were so many owners we were competitors. It was very clear cut. Today, we have fewer owners, and we could create alliances, and we could get together and create a sell-side gateway, which is really what's missing on the automation side. And it's not that people haven't tried. The TIP initiative has done a lot of hard work and really tried to get there, but getting broadcasters to agree on a sell-side gateway has been a true impediment. And there are buy-side, with Hudson MX and others that want to operate on the buy side, but we as broadcasters don't have a common way to do it. And until we have that, it's going to be an impediment to automation. And to Pat's point, automation will mean more people can buy spot television in more creative ways. And in particular, post-COVID, when the world isn't going to be running at the same rate, the economy isn't going to be exactly the same across the United States for probably a year or 18 months. Spot television is going to come as a tool. And, I'm just seeing it in things. When I look at our top 75 accounts this morning, I saw new advertisers in for first quarter that weren't in this first quarter of last year, much more than I normally see. And there are some missing soldiers as well, as we all are acutely aware. But this idea that automation is a threat, I don't think, is some people have that idea. It's up to us to control the pricing. It's up to us to set the pricing. But automating the process so that buyers can access it and use it in new and creative ways to, instead of network, I think is something that we really have to work on.
And Steve, we're here to help. I do want to interject because we have a couple of questions for the audience, and two of the questions are related, which I think are actually kind of interesting on relaxing the rules. So I'm going to try to paraphrase them, and I'm going to ask Emily to start because, as you mentioned, on size-wise, you're I would say a more petite organization, let's say. The questions really revolve around, by relaxing the rules, are you basically just opening it up for a lot of consolidation to make a few bigger companies, and at the same time you're crowding out those smaller companies? And is it really about serving the public interest versus just growing bigger, more profitable organization? I think those are fair questions. And I'm gonna ask you to start given your size.
So it's a great question. There's no exact answer, because we happen to like our size because we are in a sweet spot where we are in large markets typically. But we don't have a lot of stations. So I like to say we punch above our weight. And you can call me petite anytime you want, because I'm good with that word. But I would say there's always that risk. However, we have seen massive consolidation in the last number of years. Certainly in my 8 years at Graham, we have seen lots and lots of consolidation occur. I think that is typical of, if you look at the cycle of any industry or any business, it's like the Big Bang Theory, you come together, and then you break apart. What I think is important here is that if voices are going to be heard and maintained in these local markets, they have to be able to pay for doing things like covering the news. And it's expensive. You can't automate the covering of news. It's very difficult to cover news without people. And I think, and I don't want to speak for Pat, but I think when you get into markets that are below a certain size, and you're in a market where there is a limited amount of ad revenue to be made in general, it may make more sense if you're in South Dakota or you're in Montana or whatever market you might be in, to be able to own a couple stations in those markets and provide very valuable news coverage. Now, do I want to be bought out by one of you guys? No, I really don't. And we're not for sale, by the way. But I am very acutely aware that there are always going to be, and I think you guys would agree with this, there will always be smaller independent operators, no matter where you go in any industry, who will defy all the odds and who will be really good champions of their communities and, run circles around everybody else because they choose to do it that way. There will also be inevitable consolidation. And, one of the questions I think that was asked was about whether the networks would just become bigger buyers of local stations. I actually don't think that's what they're looking to do. I don't know. I used to work for ABC, but I haven't been there in a long time. My view on the networks is they're not necessarily interested in buying up more TV stations. They already get a sizable amount of money from us through the retrans compensation that they're able to garner. So I'm not sure why they need to buy more stations in order to make money from us. But I'm hoping that, we can have some middle road here where regulation can be lightened up a little bit. And I would personally, like, for example, one thing I'd like to see happen is I would like to see the virtual MVPDs be treated as MVPDs for the purposes of our retrans negotiations. Because right now, frankly, our networks control those negotiations. And we have to take what we can get. And I'd like to see that loosen up for our benefit, for all of our benefit.
Agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree as well, Emily. So Emily has a relative short list of stations, but has bigger markets. Gray is actually kind of the opposite. We have primarily smaller markets, but a fair number of markets that we operate in. And she talked about North Dakota and Wyoming or South Dakota, but there are a lot of markets out there where it has gotten where the third station who does news can't make money anymore because it's too expensive to produce the product, and ad revenues have sort of moved in the direction of the FANG companies. And so, taken to its logical conclusion, I mean, it's really, really difficult for in some markets, more than one television company I'm talking about the smallest of markets now, to produce news and still be able to create a business out of that. In fact, the FCC put out a study on Thursday or Friday that addressed this issue and essentially said, look, there are markets where, absolutely 4 or 5 stations or more can afford to produce news. And there are markets where maybe there's 3 and maybe there's 2 and maybe there's 4. So it's a legit issue. And particularly with the challenges of the newspaper industry, we need some source of local news and information. And television really, I think somebody said last man standing. I mean, that's who we are in a lot of these smaller markets.
I will say it's always interesting to me, now having been in this industry for a little bit. I certainly don't have the experience of you all, But it is interesting when you look and you really do the research, the effectiveness of the advertising is so much greater than digital advertising. It's really astounding. And so as a personal example, I don't know if you know the company Keepsake. It's an app company that basically will take your photos, turn them into frames. I saw that on TV on my local station during the news. So I find myself actually being more impacted where like digital, I don't even know what I'm seeing. So I do think it's always so interesting to me why these groups, because they're so easy to buy, and it feels good to be able to say, oh, I targeted these specific people. I think the actual effectiveness is pretty bad.
So I think I could add to that just a little bit tilt toward both regulation and marketing for a minute. So on a regulatory front, there's scale, what I call horizontally across many markets, and then in your market. So the idea that we could own 2 Big Fours fairly easily, I think would be very helpful. Everybody assumes that because we're owned by a PE fund and we think scale is everything, we want to be huge, and we do. We want to buy, but the dance card is getting pretty short, right, in terms of what we have to do. So another job I have is how do we make more out of what we have? And so what you just said about television drives the top of the funnel. And then the reason that we have digital and the reason we need to have digital as broadcasters is to work our way down the funnel. So we're in every conversation, and I call it in-market scale, right? It can be outside your market too. You can sell digital outside your market. But we do have this fantastic megaphone that is really kind of underutilized in many ways, that is still not fully optimized, in my opinion, to drive the top of the funnel. And then what can we do to help capture the customer journey as it works its way down the marketing funnel? The more we have our teams thinking on that level, the better off we'll be. And then when we can own 2 Big Fours, because as Pat pointed out, in many small markets, we have sort of 10 mostly larger markets and 10 small markets. So I see, and then in those small markets, we tend to have a lot of Fox affiliates. It's very difficult for a 100+ small market to mount a news effort profitably. I won't quite say it's impossible yet, Pat, but it's getting close. So you need the ideal combination is, an NBC Fox, CBS Fox, ABC Fox, and then you can actually increase the amount of news in a market. If we could get this point across to regulators, that consolidation doesn't decrease news, it likely increases news. And in our case, we're a very local news-driven company. And it is critical strategically to be in that position and to be able to increase news, because I think the other side of the coin, lack of consolidation in smaller markets, is going to lead to 1 or 2 stations, 1 or 2 Big Fours dropping out of the news, just out of cost necessity.
It is a great point, because studies show that as you lose local news in your community, government corruption goes up. I mean, that's a fact. So it's I would say a great argument.
You also lose the ability to differentiate yourself from every other source of programming. News is our differentiator. Local news in particular is our differentiator. And at our company, and I'm sure at both my partners here, companies, we're doubling down on local news wherever possible, and in many different and new ways. So, yes.
So changing some gears, looking at a little bit of the future on the business side. We're done with 2020, and I think, well, for a lot of reasons, we're happy, though. Political was obviously great for the year, and I know Steve had mentioned starting to see some movement. Emily, when you look at 2021. How are you all preparing? I also would think that as the vaccinations hopefully accelerate at a certain point, consumers start coming out, their behaviors start changing. You may suddenly find yourself inundated with advertisers. Is there flexibility to potentially increase pricing as that happens? What is your crystal ball telling you about 2020?
Well, I hope we're inundated with advertisers wanting to buy us. That would be fantastic for all of us. Right now, I think what we're seeing is January looks to be a little bit better than maybe we had anticipated a few months ago. And I just say that in the sense that the pacing is pretty good. I think what we're seeing is the purchasing of time is still very, very close to the, it's not unusual to get a call and, the schedule is going to start the next day. The flight's going to start the next day or the Monday following or whatever. That's not so much new, but it is, it makes people nervous because, the old days of, having everything booked well in advance is gone. And I don't know that it'll ever return. There are certain categories that we're looking forward to getting back once we have COVID more under control. Obviously, things like, fast, like dining and entertainment and travel. These are things that we're not seeing a whole lot of right now. Now, there is one new category, depending on the states that you're in, and that's online sports gambling, which is insane right now. And if you're in a state where online sports gambling has been legalized and, FanDuel and the other sportsbook groups are out there advertising, it's quite amazing how much it's a whole new category that has just appeared out of nowhere. And, I'm not a gambler, so I had to literally go and look up the word parlay to understand what it meant, because that's all they talk about is a 5-game parlay. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. But I do think that that is a good point, that's a good piece of evidence to what Steve said. You will see these new advertisers come along, and the most efficient and best way for them to reach customers, particularly with something new, a la sports gambling, is to use broadcast television. I also think automotive is showing some signs of renewed strength, which for us is very, very important. It's a very big part still of our business. And I think auto dealers have been pivoting themselves as to how to sell cars and how to get people to test drive. But what they need, they can do a lot online with digital, but they need to show people what that car looks like. And the best way to do that is with video of that car moving. And you can't see it as well online as you can on a beautiful high definition TV set. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this year. I hope the second half of the year is better than the first. I was a little nervous today to read that there's a sense that the Olympics is still somewhat up in the air for this summer. I had not fully realized that. And if in fact the Olympics do not, I guess we're going to find out by the end of March. But if they somehow get canceled, that will be difficult for anyone with an NBC station. And we have 2 very large NBC markets, so I certainly hope that's not the case. But I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm pretty optimistic about the second half of the year, post-COVID.
Great. So I am optimistic. I know that auto sales have been getting better, though I think now a lot of production is stopping because of the lack of semiconductors, right? Which is unfortunate. So given we're starting to come close to the end, I'm going to ask 2 more questions. One is going to be a surprise question at the end because I like putting people in an uncomfortable position. But before we go to that, Pat, I'm going to start with you. As you all think about the future, and I know we talk to a lot of people in this industry, and OTT is certainly an area that people are very focused on as we, start, I would say in some ways, moving away from necessarily watching live television. We're moving more and more to choosing when and how we're going to watch. How do you think about doing that transition? I really think about it from the standpoint of how do you get your current viewers to move with you? And then how are you going to go about attracting new viewers? Younger people, they sort of are exposed to all this stuff. How do you get through that noise?
Yeah, so I would say that in general, our goal is to aggregate the largest audience, with a focus on video views that we can, regardless of platform. We serve the content people want where they want it, whether it's a Roku app or Samsung or mobile device or a linear stream. Like everyone else, all of our stations' local content, whether news or non-news, resides on the key OTT platforms. and there's a real, a very real and growing audience there. I mean, it's. I can remember a couple of years ago, we had built a Roku app. I can't remember. This is probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And, we just hooked in a remnant pipe in there and looked up and said, oh my God, the station in, I can't remember the market, maybe Birmingham, Alabama is doing $20,000 a month in remnant video on their Roku app. And it just illustrated to me that how quickly people were sort of migrating in that direction. So, we've got our content out there for the local stations, but in terms of attracting new viewers, we're partnered with SyncBack on a service called Viewit, an aggregation play for all things local, and it's growing at a healthy clip. We have a national investigative team based in New Orleans, led by Lee Zurich, and their content is available via Investigate TV, an app that's available on all the key platforms. We have a product called Origin Sports, which is a sort of archive play from Raycom Sports, which is another company we own, that's set to launch on all the key platforms in February. We have a company that's based in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. It's called RTM, a production company with about 1,200 hours of automotive enthusiast content that's up on all the key platforms. And candidly, that's where they're getting the majority of their audience from. It used to be that their primary audience came from airings on national cable, and it's shifted over to OTT, their own site, and mobile. So we're just throwing stuff against the wall, and a lot of stuff you throw against the wall these days is finding viewers.
Great. Well, listen, I'm going to go here into the final question, the surprise question. It's more just so people can get to know a little bit more about you. One thing, when the pandemic happened here at Matrix, I encouraged everyone here to try to learn some things new, figuring you have some extra time at home, you're isolated, take this time to do something that you've never done before. So I'm curious, have you taken on any new hobbies, learned anything because of the time you might have had from the pandemic? So Pat, since you're on my screen, the biggest right now, unfortunately, I'm going to start with you. We'll then go to Steve and Emily.
Yeah, so I'm not sure we've had a lot more time. But I answer your question, I would say that that's not really new. I play a little guitar, so we actually set up a little music room. What a couple of my boys play, and so I bought a set of drums, another guitar, a mandolin, and we've been rocking out. When we have time. So that's sort of been our distraction.
Awesome, Steve.
I have been able to get out. I'm kind of I have a hobby. Have been an avid rider, trail rider, with a friend of mine who's also in the business and is an expert horsewoman and my best friend. But then I took up a couple of weird things during the pandemic, or to me, that I didn't think I would do. One is it's a little embarrassing, bird feeding. I started feeding birds in my backyard, and I become like this. Whenever I walk outside now, the birds, they're not stupid, and they operate on sight. Okay. Yeah. And then the other thing is stargazing, since I'm weathering in the desert, where I have out in the desert where I have low ambient light. I've taken up looking at the sky. So that's pretty much. But it's simple, and at least
you're
those
getting back
two
to
things.
Nature.
Yes.
Let's call it that way. And Emily.
So I have become unbelievably attached to doing very complicated Liberty puzzles. And if you don't know what a Liberty puzzle is, they are expensive. They're about $130 a piece. But they are made out of wood, and they are laser cut into the most intricate of patterns you've ever seen. It's not like
cool.
It's not a jigsaw puzzle like you're used to seeing. The shapes are really they're really incredibly spectacular. And I've roped in 7 friends of mine from high school, And we now bicycle the puzzles all over the country, and it's costing us a fortune in mailing. But my dining room table always has a puzzle going. They're kind of fantastic because when I do one, I'm so focused on it, I can't think about anything else. So what's great is it's a good relief to, sort of the stresses of the day. I mean, I also work out, but that's neither here nor there. I'm never going to be an Olympic athlete, but I think the puzzles have really kept my mind focused on something other than work.
It's meditation.
And it is meditation. And it's been, they're unbelievable puzzles. And by the way, I feel like I'm doing an ad for Liberty, but if you go on their website and try to order a puzzle, there's a 57-day waiting list just to order one puzzle. And
Wow.
if they catch you trying to sell that puzzle on eBay, you are banned from their site for life. So they take this stuff very, very seriously. And they're beautiful puzzles. They're fun to do. And they probably keep my mind a little sharper than maybe it would be otherwise. So.
Phenomenal. Well, listen, I want to thank the three of you for joining us. It's been a great conversation. I can't thank you enough for spending this time with us, with all the viewers, and we certainly look forward to seeing you all in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Thank you
us.
very much, Mark.
Having me anyway.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Care.
Bye.